Good morning, Dane. How you doing?
I'm good, sir. How are you?
I'm blessed, my brother. Always, in always. I can never complain. I'm here. We're here, in it, healthy, alive. So
It's true. This is true. This is true. I mean, yeah,
got
I
to give
can't complain for
thanks.
myself. My center's pretty good, but obviously, always an idealist. Always yearning for more change in the world and for a better world for me and my people, I guess. But other than that, like I said, I'm good, man.
Good, good. You're a deep one. Not a lot of people know that. Maybe your fans know that, but not a lot of people outside of your circle. So I really want to
Yeah,
explore and get into this new show that you're going to be hosting, Bamous.
this is kind of like the culmination of like a 3-year development process with the BBC of me kind of to not only get another project off the ground, but also have a lot more creative control. So Bamous is a co-production with my own production company, John's Boy Entertainment Limited, as well as Spirit Studios, distributed by the BBC. So there's a lot of firsts, so far as a being a black majority cast entertainment show, as well as one being hosted by a black man, and also that black man also being involved as a producer as well. So a lot of firsts involved between my production company as well. But yeah, I'm glad to have it out. Glad that it's now available, and I really hope it does the kind of job that I intended for it to do. So Bamous is a word I came up with, which is a portmanteau, it's a mixture of the words black and famous. I got the idea because I guess throughout my journey as a artist, I noticed that there's a real cross to bear for black creatives, whereby for you to kind of transcend into the mainstream a lot of time and achieve mainstream success historically, a lot of the time within that stream, to use the same analogy, a lot of your work would become diluted when you enter into the stream. And what tends to happen is that as a result of trying to mold yourself to be more affable to predominantly white audiences, you'd lose credibility amongst black audiences in the first place, which would then work in a weird work as a detriment to you, because if you haven't got the credibility of your peer group, especially when that peer group is known characteristically for being innovators and introducing new art and new aesthetics to the culture, then your whole brand becomes kind of diminished. So I was kind of like, I think it's always been the plight of the black creative to maintain your integrity or to keep it real, to use a colloquial expression, while being successful as possible. So Famous was about me exploring my journey as a comedian and how I kind of wanted to achieve that. And so I'm almost at a point now in my career where I've been doing comedy just over 10 years. And, it's normally what it takes for someone to be an overnight celebrity, I suppose. So, yeah, Famous, the idea is about me basically transcending into the mainstream, becoming like a national treasure, being recognized as one of the most significant uh, comedians of my generation, but at the same time, not losing sense of who I was. And the Nas Black was kind of a tool for me to kind of work it out. So the Nas Black is obviously based on the Nas Black, which is the listing for blue chip stock companies on the stock market in America. And I kind of took that concept where I was like, as using it as an index of measuring black excellence. And with the creatives nowadays, people tend to refer to what they do as their brand. So in terms of like their, I suppose, performance matrix and all different things they do as their brand. So I just want to look at the brands of my predecessors, some of my successors and my contemporaries and people I'm working with now. And I also want to work at a black print of what you do to go about achieving that level of excellence where you can become a household name. So essentially, that's what Bamous is about my journey into terms of me trying to achieve superstardom, but at the same time, recognizing those that have gone before me, those that are doing their things now, and also people who will be doing their thing to come. But essentially, making it a recognition of the contribution of Black creatives to both Black culture as well as British culture and global culture as a whole. So, the saying nowadays is that we don't give our icons or our heroes flowers while they're here. So Bamous works like a online florist where we're giving out all the flowers all the time.
Then you worked hard to be in a position where you can give out flowers. I'm wondering about your own personal journey, really, because this obviously colours a lot of what we're going to see.
Yeah,
Peaks and troughs, I guess, for anybody who wants to be successful in life, right? But
absolutely,
they seem to be
absolutely.
disproportionate where our journeys are concerned. Talk about your own personal walk, some of the things that frustrated you, some of the things that you hope to see change in a not too distant future, and how some of the things that are being challenged in Bamous.
Yeah, well, I mean, exactly as you say, Joel. I find that like a lot of the time with creatives, everyone has peaks and troughs. I mean, this is the natural part of human life. You need these frames of reference to work out joy, pain, etc. But I think what is very nuanced to your Black creative is that when anyone is talking about their journey, as long as soon as that journey becomes part of the industry, then it's a given that you're going to experience one form of institutional racism or another. So, I always say to people is like, you got to think about like somewhere in the world, like when we talk about like Motown, for example, and we talk about like, the icons of Motown, there's a group of white people at a table in America being like, yeah, and then Stevie Wonder showed up and we started throwing shit at them so they couldn't come into the building. Like, it's very weird that there's some people that's their memories of these feats of human achievement and triumph. So yeah, it's definitely been a part of my journey. But, I guess for me, I was kind of aware of that when I began that I'll be dealing with adversity, because I began doing comedy around the time where a Black presence within that industry and entertainment as a whole had become very sparse. So so to give you an idea, when I did Sunny D, which was my sitcom, it turned out that was the first Black British sitcom that had been on the BBC or terrestrial television in 20 years.
Wow.
So yeah, 20 years. And 20 years is maybe a few years shy of, or the equivalent of a generation, which meant that there is an entire generation of people who would be described as like either early millennials or, younger Generation X, who were deprived of any representation of themselves on TV screens, especially when we went the migration into digital television. The implication for that is not just for the lack of representation for Black people. It also means that you have an entire generation of predominantly white Britons who have been deprived of any aesthetics for them to be able to know how to interact with people that look different to them. What I think a lot of people may not understand is that, there are some people in Britain who live in satellite towns or remote villages or farther parts of the country where their interaction with people, with non-white people, is seldom or pretty much zero. That's through no fault of their own, it's just a function of demographics. What that means is that most people form their outward perception based on what they see in mainstream media. Now, because of that, that lack of that presence meant there'd be a very unbalanced perception of Black people, Asians, et al., being built within the country, which meant that precipitated in that I'd have conversations with white people and they've not seen anyone like me for such a long time. They don't know how to act. So they're kind of like, how do I speak to a Black person? Do I have to reference my Black friend? And it's like, you can talk to Black people about the weather like everybody else. We live in Britain too, so we're more than aware of what the temperature's like. So yeah, that was definitely difficult for myself. But by the same token, I thought about how difficult that would have been for my predecessors, because it meant that, a lot of comics that went before me wouldn't have had the opportunity to be on television. And I suppose now you have the advent of digital media, whereby there are a lot less middlemen. So if you are a creative, you can just go directly to the source and build your audience that way. And we've seen, with people like Coyote Iwumi and Mo Gilligan and Munya Chihuahua, how you can build a following that can be undeniable because you don't have to worry about gatekeepers. But I guess my journey is that I was somewhere in between both those worlds. So I'm somewhere in the middle where I'm just a bit older than that generation who enjoyed the online success, but also had maybe a lot more comparable opportunities to my predecessors who had no TV opportunities. So I was kind of aware of that when I started. And so when I began doing comedy, it was very hard to make up how the landscape worked. But once I kind of got an idea, I kind of became aware of who I wanted to be within that industry and what changes I wanted to make. So after I saw how marginalized, and then there was also a very big rift I should talk about as well, because this is also where the inspiration for Bamous came from, is that there's a rather large rift whereby it seemed that comics that were playing predominantly Black rooms couldn't prosper within mainstream rooms or at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, the world's largest arts festival, and for good reason. It was suggested that that wasn't for them, because they would look at just, the superficial state of it and think, well, there's no one that looks like me there, so why would I be interested? Which is more than fair. But by the same token, I had also noticed that the level of showmanship and the aptitude that most Black comics had was superior to a lot of their white counterparts. So I was kind of like, well, why would you not want, you're better than most people that are there at this level, because, Black rooms, there's not a lot of open mic, there's not much room for error. So you actually have to mature as a comic very quickly on the Black circuit. So, but by the same token, I was kind of like, if there had been a point in time where my predecessors were on TV, like in the form of the Real McCoy and Get Up, Stand Up and the A-Force and Desmond, it means that people in the UK obviously have a palette that is open to a black aesthetic when it comes to their comedy. So it's not that people are adverse to it, but I guess it's like anything. If you don't see something or you're not observing it, you become rusty or you become unaware of it. You know, for example, we live in a country whereby at one point, I remember the national dish of the UK being curry. Then all of a sudden, Islamophobia is a thing. So again, it just shows you how much media can influence these things. So sitting in the middle of all of these different points, I was kind of like, how can I bridge this gap and kind of bring, all of these kind of worlds together? Because really, they're all comedy at the end of the day. And I look at, if a country that is overtly racist is able to have, your Tiffany Haddishes and your Dave Chappelle's and your Kevin Hart's and your Chris Rocks, then there is no reason why a comic who's born in the UK and is aware of the sensibilities and the nuance of living under, post-imperial, post-colonial rule, or being a descendant of the Windrush generation, isn't able to connect with a larger audience. Because, black music has been enjoyed as far back as, from Windrush to ska to ragga to rock. So I looked at if we can be endeared to the culture that easily, there's no reason why we can't do it with comedy. And I felt like comedy is very different in that comedy probably has more of a superior ability to music in order to just provide narration to the black experience. And I feel like that was the difference between ourselves and Americans. Even though Americans are overtly racist, if they are curious and want to hear the rebuttal from African Americans, there are artists that could provide that. Whereas in this country, we always have a problem where, like, to put it another way, Americans, in terms of their treatment of black people, is like, what? Black people? Whereas in Britain, they're like, what's black people? So we've historically been dealing with a very different type of racism, which is more about, I suppose, kind of obscuring us and more about just vocal suppression as opposed to this physical suppression. So that was my difficulty there, was like, initially a lot of the critical class would try and reduce the work of black creatives and saying that they were doing a poor homage to like their American contemporaries. And also, a flat out denial that the severity of racism that a lot of black comedians were articulating in their work was happening in the UK. And what would happen instead is that you would have the gatekeepers indulging black comics who are still talking about the same issues like race relations, but from the perspective of an American, like with Reginald D. Hunter, or from South Africa in the form of Trevor Noah. And I found it very strange that even though obviously these guys are very talented, great comedians, why they would be leapfrogging over domestic-based black comedians to get opportunities on TV. So I definitely have to just find a way to really take a look at the social fabric and narrative of Britain's comedy industry, which was largely quasi-liberal and middle class, and literally find a way to learn to beat to that particular drum while still maintaining the sensibility that black audiences could still understand enough that I could cement myself and then make them beat to my drum. So that was kind of the difficulty. It was a long journey to kind of learn to hone my voice and make a voice that was nuanced and, relatable and accurate depiction of, the journey of myself and the diaspora, but not so nuanced that if you were a black person living in Norwich, for example, you were living in Newcastle, it's not accessible to you because you yourself have also been deprived of like representations of yourself on TV. But at the same time, I had to kind of almost be a bit rudimentary and be like, this is almost like a Black People 101. So it was almost like, I guess my narrative has kind of been like, hello, or dear white people, this is Black people in the 21st century.
And you're an anomaly, really, aren't you?
Pretty much, yeah.
Everything you've just outlined is your own personal journey, but it also takes an awareness that you're the conduit within all of those strands. You're traversing polar opposites or polarities within the same industry that maybe the Black comedian doesn't normally undertake, doesn't normally even embrace as part of their vision. Yet you seem to see the whole wider picture quite early. What's it? It must be, I said at the beginning of this one, you're a deep one. Listening to you, it must be not a daunting task, but it must be quite tiresome to pull it all together. And I guess this is probably why Bamous and getting this project is so satisfying for you.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I would say initially it was a daunting task, but I guess I was always able to juxtapose it with what I was doing before. I was working in media sales. I hated my job. I was a lot more subject to like the same institutional racism and microaggressions people have in the office, but I was able to make jokes about it. Whereas now I had like an artistic outlet. So even at my at the height of my frustrations, I could always find a way of channeling that into material, and seeing it as a challenge to find even more subversive ways to be blunt in terms of discussing the state of race relations in the UK and in Europe as a whole. But yeah, I guess it was a big task, but I kind of felt like, part of my research, I suppose, was that research is always a good way to kind of procrastinate. So before I actually jumped in with 10 toes into the comedy, I looked at my Chris Rocks and the Dave Chappelle's, and ended up going on like YouTube and then Wikipedia rabbit holes. So then when they would discuss race relations, and then I would kind of look at how race relations existed, and then even discussing the idea of race and just the definition of that. And so it all became kind of like a funnel and a journey of, self-discovery and also discovery as well. And I guess the way I saw it was like, if I'm going to do this and speak about race relations, then I need to look at who's done it and how they've done it. And obviously we know there are amazing people, not just in the US, but in the UK. Like one of the first comics I ever saw perform was Leo Muhammad. And so I'd say he is 33% of the reason why I decided to become a comedian at 15 years old. And I looked at that and it was like, it's been done very well, but being aware of the pitfalls of being accused of being hack or covering old ground, I really just took a time to just do kind of an anthropological study of just humanity and what was the definition of Black, because I feel like I said that if the potentiality of me becoming a conduit came about, I guess with comics and all artists, a lot of the time I'd seen that when you are a Black creative, you're kind of held to standards whereby you'll be offered a soundbite and that will be used as the underlining of the Black experience for maybe a very long time. People tend to hold us by these statements. So I guess I just try to do the research where I'll be like, if I'm asked about a particular thing or they question me about a particular thing, I'll be able to answer. So I was just really just kind of getting the material together so that as my journey increased, my horizons broadened, then I would be able to interact. And also just because, like I said, I just wanted to do the job well. I really just wanted to be like, I didn't want to walk on stage and, preface anything I say by being like, well, when Black people do this, because I always feel like that can definitely contribute negatively to, the collective consciousness of the diaspora, whereby if I say Black people do this, I didn't ever want it to be inaccessible to Black people. I felt like the primary objective of what I was doing was galvanization first and making sure I understood and had reverence and respect for the people who I'd be speaking about, because I was aware if I say something on stage for people who are not au fait with Black culture or Black people, they're going to form their perception of us based on what I say. And, I myself have been the recipient of microaggressions or idiotic ramblings from people based on what they've seen on TV. Even if it's not actually been represented by Black people, whatever they perceive to be culture, that's what people have to hear back. So I kind of had to preempt that. But yeah, for me, it was like, when I was younger, I didn't think it was a job I'd be able to have professionally. So even at the most difficult task always still feels challenging, and there's still some exhilaration because, like a lot of my peers, we don't normally have the privilege of having our creative aspirations encouraged by our parents, because our parents aren't really predisposed to be able themselves be able to entertain their own ideas and their own aspirations. So yeah, it was there were a few acts of rebellion about it. So the part about researching where I was from and who I wanted to speak about it was a daunting task, but yeah, I think the excitement of being able to do it was able to make it a much easier process.
You mentioned other comics are hailed, celebrated in this, lauded. Who are some of those people? And just give us an insight into some of the sketches, maybe not all of them.
Of course. Oh, so first of all, it's definitely the ethos of Bamous is to include new and upcoming talent. So have Munya Chihuahua, who's had a meteoric rise online over the last year. Tanya Moore, again, who's been an amazing comic on the circuit and has done great things. And Lola Jagan as well, who herself has done a lot of online content and is providing her a platform to allow that to seamlessly transcend onto terrestrial channels as well. And so far as reverence, it would be remiss to not speak about some of the work that people have done this year, like Marcus Rashford, and not just for his commendation from the monarchy, not at all, but the fact that he is that with all of the faux inclusive narrative of all lives matter, he actually exemplified it where he's like, no, I care about all people, and with all of our politicians in this country, all of our philanthropic organizations, like probably been one of the best demonstrations of humanitarian care seen on a large scale in many years. So definitely celebrate that. Obviously celebrating Lewis Hamilton, not only for his achievements, but also because we recognize the significance of him being in a space where people that look like us are seldom seen, if at all. So that's one of the lines of celebration as well. And also, yeah, and a nod and a very quick nod, not to give too much stuff away, but some nods to some of my comic predecessors, so some of the more recognizable icons in comedy from the BBC and from ITV, respectively. But yeah, if you can think of most comedians in the UK that have gone before me, then we do make an effort to try and reference them whenever we can.
Before I close then, man, 2020 was shambolic for a lot of people.
Yeah,
I saw you were very vocal on a wide range of issues that were pertinent to Black people last year. You were one of the vocal ones, and I respect you for that. This year, what's priority for you, Black man? What do you want to see?
I want to see what I always want to see. You know, they always, you know, it's one of these questions when you are in the forefront is, what do you think the problems with Black people, or what's something you don't like about Black culture? And my answer is always the same, man, that we just don't love ourselves enough. And I feel like, you know, once we have that self-love, we will observe the galvanization. I believe once you have a positive self-image, then you are able to set standards for yourself of what you'll accept and what you will not accept. And, you know, and then everything kind of follows that. Like, you know, you have to be the change you want to see. So for me, 2021 is kind of more of the same. I genuinely believe, and there is now historical and statistical evidence for the fact that, once again, Black people, despite being a demographic minority in the West, have been instrumental in preventing the resurgence of fascism in the West. Pretty much have now saved political assassinations. Eugene Goodman, who you may have seen, saved the state capital from, you know, people committing political assassinations in the name of fascism as well. Not to mention the work done by Stacey Abrams in terms of mobilizing and recruiting the Black politically mobile in Georgia and turning over the Senate to a Democratic majority, which is amazing as well. And then, you know, I look at the great work that's being done by Black people in this country as well. Like I said, Marcus Rashford, you know, you have positive political presences in the form of like people like, I suppose, Dawn Butler. What she's doing as well, being very vocal. You know, I think with the emergence of anthologies like Small Acts, even though for some people they are divisive, they are kind of at the same time doing the work that I want to do as well. Where it's like, let's establish presence first, you know, and then we can, and then once we have that presence, we should be able to enjoy, like any other product, as a period of saturation and competition, where, you know, the more of us there are, then people are able to make their nuanced decisions as to what they like more. So in the case of like Small Acts, for example, some people are like, it's not accurate, not an accurate depiction of what happened. Is like, the question isn't if Steve McQueen did everything correctly. The question should be, how come it's only Steve McQueen doing it? You know, so and so moving forward, like, so Bamous, I might helm the ship, but the idea is that, you know, like I said, I'm trying to bring a quasi Windrush generation, and, you know, people will be able to move off and do their own things. And you know, one of the great things about working on Sunny D, even though I didn't get a second series, is that, you know, I got to work with Don Warrington and, you know, I guess carry the torch in terms of his appearance on Rising Damp initially and make that a retrospective. Bemi Ikumelo, who played my sister in Sunny D, had never done TV prior, but was from the Royal Shakespeare Company, so has now given awareness to aspiring Black creatives that they can work within as a Shakespearean actors. But she's also now a TV actress, as well as a BAFTA award-winning actress as well. And, you know, it's testament to who we are as people, that all it took was for her to get one springboard to, in the space of a few years, become, you know, a BAFTA award-winning star, as well as David Ajay, who played my best friend, hadn't done any TV before that as well. So for me, 2021 is the same thing, is that it's always reflecting on the opportunities I've been given, paying it forward by holographic principle, and letting other people have the same opportunity. And yeah, just returning us to, you know, to a state of recognition and glory that I think we rightfully deserve as creatives, especially if nothing else. And yeah, I guess I pull up a seat to the table in 2020, and 2021 is about cementing the seats in there.
More power with that, Dane, and, you know, wishing you all the success with Bamous and everything else you touch moving forward. Continue doing the good work, sir, and I'm sure we'll be having another conversation pretty soon, to be honest with you.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Appreciate your time, Black man. Look after, have a blessed.